society is deeply predicated on traditional practices and values. Ever since humans have developed language and writing, they have used them as a vector for transmitting ritualistic behaviors, pass on anecdotes, and communicate with one another. As primitive cultures were now able to exchange information easier, more elaborate societies arose, with more complex rituals and survival strategies. As generations passed, these rituals and strategies were passed down a sufficient number of times to be considered as tradition. Traditions are held with a certain reverence by cultures, a desire to do things as they've always been done, and to appease their ancestors. Cultures that predate modern science found themselves in an extremely complex and diverse world, surrounded by chaotic phenomena that was inexplicable. There appeared to be a striking illusion of design all around them, from the grass to the heavens. Considering that humans tend to think in terms of cause and effect, natural phenomena had to be ascribed to somebody's doing. Without any scientific enterprise to rely on, the only explanations that could be conceived of were that of the supernatural and superstition. Shirley Jackson's famous American short story, The Lottery, revolves around a small rural town with a population of 300 individuals who conduct an annual lottery with all the townspeople in the town square. All of the people must draw in the lottery. A black dot is drawn on a single slip of paper. Whoever receives the slip with the black dot is swiftly stoned to death by the rest of the townspeople. It is a work of speculative fiction, on account of the fictional setting it takes place in, that is only loosely based on any real-world location, as well as the fantasy elements of the lottery procedure. The featured town is a smaller village compared to others that also partake in the lottery, as there are some towns in which there were so many people that the lottery took days, but this particular lottery would conclude in less than 2 hours. The tradition of the lottery has been going strong for at least centuries, as Old Man Warner has taken part in 77 lotteries, and the ominous black box that the tickets are placed into is not the original paraphernalia that was used for the lottery, as it was lost long ago, but was still used before Warner's time. Even though the box was deteriorating in condition, the people were hesitant to use a new box in fear of breaking tradition, even though it was known that the tradition was already broken with the arrival of the black box. Although some rumors persist that the black box was made from parts of the original, perhaps to satisfy the fierce traditionalism. Yet, just as modern society is rapidly evolving, while typically leaving many traditions confined to the past, Mr. Summers, the man in charge of the lottery, had successfully argued that the original method of using wooden chips as tickets was no longer practical due to the population size, and substituted them for paper slips. This demonstrates how even the most conservative of people are willing to stray from customs, when it is simply no longer a viable option to continue them. For instance, Pope Francis of the Catholic Church has declared that evolution in nature is not in contrast with the notion of creation. This is a highly unorthodox position for the Catholic Church, as they have been vehemently opposed to the theory of evolution since Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species. With the sequencing of the human genome, the evidence for evolution finally became irrefutable, and tradition gave way to science, critical thinking, and progressivism. This forces the Church to adopt a new position, just as the increasing population of the town forced Mr. Summers to use paper slips rather than wooden chips. After the lottery, the black box is put away, and seldom stored in the same place. It had spent 1 year in Mr. Graves's barn and another year underfoot in the post office. And sometimes it was set on a shelf in the Martin grocery and left there. This suggests that following the lottery, the town appears to neglect the box, and the notion of the lottery. Mr. Summers usually suggests that a new box be made, but discussion of it slowly dissipates. Considering that the box does not have official storage place also suggests that the origins of the lottery are probably a mystery, and that the practice has most likely been altered from its original form in various ways. This is shown by the confusion regarding the official of the lottery, and what he is supposed to do. Some people believe he is to give a monotone chant, others believe he is supposed to sing it. Some believe he is to stand still, others think he is supposed to walk around the people, but nevertheless, No official policy is dictated. The lottery appears to be something that the people of the village are happy to forget about for a majority of the year, at least until school is out and May turns to June, that is. As the townsfolk gather around for the drawing, there is casual banter as Mrs. Tessie Hutchinson arrives late, candidly mentioning how she forgot what day it is, and having a laugh with Mrs. Delacroix. Some men calmly discuss trivial matters, such as taxes, but as the lottery commences, tension and unease stirs in the crowd. Mrs. Hutchinson assumes the role of de facto protagonist, as she is the most featured character. Her husband, Bill Hutchinson, draws the unlucky winner. Tessie immediately protests, becoming frantic, saying that the drawing was not fair. Her pleas were not met with the slightest of sympathies, and even Mrs. Delacroix tells her be a good sport, Tessie. Bill's ticket with the black dot is put back in the box, and 4 additional slips are added in, one for each of his family, which includes 3 children. Each one of his family must draw, and Tessie ends up with the ghastly ticket. She pleads again, but to no avail, and is brutally stoned to death. A bystander even gives a stone to little Davy, Tessie's youngest son. Tessie's behavior when she is the one chosen is somewhat paradoxical, as she has presumably stoned many others to death as she is a middle-aged woman, and the lottery takes place every year. Her calm, light-hearted demeanor preceding the lottery almost seems slightly facetious. This behavior and the behavior of the crowd, following Tessie's drawing, is easily explanatory by human psychology, and the need to conform and give in to peer pressure. The antagonist can be considered as several people or entities. Mr. Summers is in charge of conducting the lottery, but he is merely following traditions. It would be more comprehensive to say the ritual itself is the antagonist. The other piece of literature that relates to this short story the most appears to be Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, which, although is an entirely different category of literature, many of the same elements are used, such as dark subject matter and quasi-religious imagery. Human sacrifice is a practice that is seen in various cultures throughout history. There are many reasons why human sacrifice is practiced, but it is typically as an offering to a god or deity of some form. Many ancient civilizations worshipped the sun, distant stars, planets, and other miscellaneous celestial phenomena. People were often killed in a ritualistic fashion to appease these apparently bloodthirsty deities. Considering these societies were entirely oblivious to why things happen, without any knowledge of science, they were extremely superstitious. Natural disasters needed to have a culprit responsible. If there was a mass famine due to a crop failure, it must have been because the gods were displeased for one reason or another. The lottery centers around a form of brutal human sacrifice that was most likely originated in order to appease a deity to grant them a large corn harvest. As Old Man Warner says, used to be a saying about lottery in June, corn be heavy soon. Superstition and human sacrifice are closely linked. In order to break out of superstitious thinking, a comprehension and understanding of how the world works is necessary. The only possible way to do that is with science and critical thinking. Jackson is conveying the importance of thinking for yourself, rather than blindly following dogma, and accepting truth on authority rather than evidence. Science will ever be at odds with superstition, and contemporarily superstitious thinking often finds a home in religion. Judging by their dialect and mannerisms, the society featured in the story is likely basing their beliefs, however loosely, on the God of Abraham, whom is quite partial to stoning people to death for various reasons such as adultery, or gathering sticks on Saturday. The black box symbolizes the Bible or Quran. Much like these texts, the black box has been completely altered over the years, and worsening in condition from its original, pristine form. The deteriorating condition of the box can be an allegory to verses in the Bible being lost in translation, thus changing its meaning entirely. When Mr. Adams says that the village to the north is talking about giving up the lottery, Old Man Warner dismisses them as a pack of crazy fools. Warner's contempt for even discussing the abolition of the lottery is reflective of the antiquated notions that are often touted in the name of upholding traditions. The disdain towards free inquiry is a detriment to human flourishing. And it is uncontroversial to say that this village society is certainly not maximizing human flourishing, or better yet, not reducing human suffering by this practice. These people are prepared to kill children in the name of their traditions and superstitions. There are certainly parallels that can be clearly drawn from the lottery to contemporary society. Today children are killed every day in the name of ancient traditions. Terrorist organizations such as ISIS often justify their actions through Islam and the example of Muhammad. This occurs for precisely the same reason Tessie Hutchinson was stoned to death by her neighbors, friends, and family. Stoning still occurs today, usually in the Middle East, and usually by mandate of the Quran. Science has given us everything we have today, from the internet to doubling our lifespans. Jackson has crafted a dark tale which illustrates the horrors imposed on society when it is governed by ancient laws and traditions.